Hi, everybody.
Hello. I'm trying
Hello
to
there.
fix the thing,
The thing. What
the
thing?
thing, the meeting uh agenda thing.
Ah, I haven't been in there yet. Are
Yeah,
you
that's
hosting today?
preferably not because I'm barely working
All right.
like at all.
All right. So, you're just like filling in details. Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
I you know almost didn't make that like the copy paste at all. So yeah, I'm not working today.
Cool. Uh, all right. Everybody else, also, I would suggest if you have any questions or ideas or things you want to chat about today, throw them on to the agenda as we let everyone join us. We'll get started in just a minute, but that's our usual agenda. Um, Hello, hello, more joiners.
Hi everyone. Good to see you all. I was on a break, so I'm joining in a little late after KubeCon. So yeah.
Yeah, you were doing quite the tour on Europe, weren't you? How was all that?
Yes, yes. It was super fun, quite exciting.
Good. All right. Getting to that time where we'll get started. So I think I recognize most faces, but I never know if it's from this group or other things. So just as a reminder, if you are new, we will welcome you to do a quick hello to everyone. If you want to share just a 1 minute who you are and why you're interested in this group so that people know if they should reach out to you about opportunities and things that you know. It just gives people some context. And then what we'll do is just run through a few of the activities that are ongoing that people may be interested in getting involved with or giving feedback on. And then we'll probably, if I see the right people, I see Dominic for sure, try and do a deep dive into one subject is that's our goal usually. And so right now the biggest piece of work that's ongoing is the platform as a product conversations. And so if there's something there, Dominic, have a think if there's something that you'd want to, or anyone else, dive into, that would be a good thing to do. So feel like usually this is about when people are in. So does anyone want to introduce themselves as newbies to the calls?
I can go as a newbie.
Oh, guys.
Chris, if you want to go as well. Okay, so I'm Nick. I've been working in the platform engineering space a little bit over 5 years and have personal connections with many of you for different reasons and being part of this space, but didn't really actively contribute to this working group and discussing at KubeCon with you. I think it's about time to get a little bit deeper and support more this work you're doing, which is great. So
Awesome,
that's
welcome. Got Buddha's got hand raised. So we'll go with the very mature, nice way of doing things. So which we sometimes do, sometimes don't, but I like it. Go for it.
Fine. I started off with just saying hello, and then I was like, maybe this is the better way of doing it. But hey, folks, I am Buddha. I am developer advocate at Tyke, which, if you know or do not know, is an open source API gateway and management platform. My area of interest over here, I've been to a couple of the tag app delivery calls before, and they've been very useful. I think this was more of an opportunity to sort of get to know a little bit more into sort of deep diving specific topics and initiatives from the working group. My area of interest right now specifically is around the API platform maturity model, which I think it builds on the CNCF platform engineering maturity model that was already published, I think, last year. We sort of extended that a little bit at Tyke, but it's sort of meant to be a little bit more community driven. So looking for some feedback and some guidance around that, which is what Richard is here as well to do. So that's sort of the area of interest for us. And obviously platform as a product, another big area of interest for us. So looking forward to contributing more positively in the future. So thank you for having me.
And do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Dan Cerulli, and I lead cloud native product management at Nutanix, which is a storage and virtualization company. I worked in the CNCF before. Well, it was before it was the CNCF, but I was on the Istio steering committee for a while, and I worked pretty extensively with Marsh Gardner on the Open API initiative, where we both sat on that board when it was created. And I had a conversation with him last month, and he said, "Hey, we Nutanix are looking at ways to contribute." And I don't know if people here know, Nutanix just bought D2iQ, which was Mesosphere before. And so Marsh said, you should come check this out. So I'm here checking it out. And if it seems like something that we have some stuff to add, then I think this could be a great place for us to help contribute.
Awesome. Welcome. And Chris, we've got you as well.
I think you're on mute,
double
Chris.
double mute.
Amazing. This is a great start. Hello. So I will say hello to you all again. My name is Chris. I'm the CTO and co-founder at Humantech. And I'll give you a bit of background. I've actually built my first platform over 10 years ago. I didn't know it was an internal developer platform. I didn't know anything about platform engineering because these things did not exist. But that's where I started. I was in the City of London at a place called Lloyd's of London. Some of you may have heard of it. I also spent 3.5 years at Google working as a product manager on some of their internal developer platform aspects. And for the last 4 or 5 years has been Humanitech trying to bring the ideas of internal developer platforms and platform engineering to more companies. I met some of you at KubeCon a couple of weeks ago, and I had a quick chat to Abby afterwards and realized that I should probably be joining this group because it sounds like an interesting place for discussions.
Cool. Welcome. Thanks for coming by. It was very fun at the coffees, so appreciate you being around for those as well. Richard, what's up?
Hey, so yeah, another new attendee joining off the back of recent platform events here in London, UK. I think there's one tomorrow as well I'll be at. And yeah, joining Buddha as we're working on an API platform as a product maturity model. And I'm more from a product research, user research background. So yeah, here to learn about how that product mindset can be applied in a platform setting and contribute my expertise of over 12, 13 years working on platforms of all shapes and sizes.
Nice. Well, welcome. Yes, we've run into each other a few meetups, which is very nice to see you here. So yeah, there's lots of new joiners. There always are, thankfully, after events, including KubeCons and other things. It's always nice to get new insights and new perspectives on things. As I said, we've got the biggest piece of work ongoing right now is the platform as a product work, and we're going to allocate the majority of today chatting about that. But before I jump into that, it'd be nice to get through some of the smaller topics so that we can all feel like we can sink our teeth into that for the remainder of the time. So per the intros, I thought it would be interesting to hear a little bit more about this API platform maturity model that y'all worked on at Tyke, and mostly about what your hopes are for it, more so than about the content itself, as I don't know if anyone here will have had a chance to read it, and that maybe we can allocate some more discussion time to it at the next session where we would have had time to read and digest and ask questions. But yeah, what are your hopes and dreams for the introduction of this sort of deeper dive on one aspect of the platform engineering maturity model?
Rich, maybe I'll introduce and then you join in with anything I'm missing over here. So, right. So the API platform engineering, the API platform as a product maturity model, or the API platform maturity model, it builds on the work that, again, like I said previously, CNCF did with the platform engineering maturity model. And the objective of this was about letting people assess where they are today in their platform maturity journey, sort of charting out a roadmap of where they hope to be in the future, and then potentially making wise or effective investments in terms of resources and tooling, etc., to actually help bridge that gap in a more effective manner. So that's kind of the primary hope about why we brought this together. There were a couple of changes that we made, or rather a couple of updates that we made in terms of this particular model as compared to where the platform engineering maturity model was. And I think one key thing was sort of splitting it into two personas. I think we split out the maturity model by two personas. One that is targeted towards the decision makers, which is fairly similar to what CNCF initially did. And then the second one, which is dedicated towards the implementers, where we are looking at some of the outcomes that are driven by API platforms, including things like security, observability, and consumer experience, developer experience, etc. There are certain levels that are associated with it. There are questions associated with it for you to assess. So that, again, this is very much a starting point. This is based on some of the conversations that we had with people before we put together sort of an API platform engineering fundamentals program, which Abby was a part of as well, which is great. And we spoke to a lot of people about what they would find beneficial, and this sort of led to this kind of a maturity model. But again, by no means is the work done. So what we're hoping here is obviously to get some feedback and validate some of the hypotheses that we have put behind this maturity model, get some sort of real use cases and scenarios that we can test out to see if this actually holds up under those circumstances, and then take it even a step forward and actually hopefully get it adopted by CNCF itself as something that is open to the community for adoption. So while we at Type have started the work, it doesn't need to stay with us. We want this to be very much community driven. It needs to be open. One of our key sort of linkages to this also is to make sure that when we talk about implementation, we're talking about open standards, sort of driving those implementation forward in their maturity journey and what that would also look like. So that's kind of broadly where we are at this point of time. I'm happy to share the link to the maturity model as well. There's a little bit more work going on this. But yeah, right now, ideally, we want a little bit more feedback, a little bit more validation, and hopefully a little bit more contribution in terms of making it usable or useful for people to make those decisions better.
And if anyone wants just a little like background into where this came from and how we devised this model, essentially, like Type provides an API management solution. And historically, that was building a set of developer tools on top of our gateway in order to make it easier to create, test, launch, and manage APIs. And what we realized after doing like in-depth analysis of the customers adopting our platform is that essentially what they were using APIs to do was to put in place a sort of platform engineering team structure, whereby the majority of our sort of, I guess, 80% of our customers are loosely around using APIs to connect their internal applications, and then a central platform team manages the sort of the API estate and gives the tooling to enable distributed application developers to add APIs into that central platform, and then the versioning, the access management, and security can all be applied centrally, but then the actual API development done by the application teams themselves, which obviously reflects quite neatly the sort of a platform team and team topologies sort of worldview. And so when we kind of came to that realization at Type and understanding how optimizing for that setup, API is actually almost like the glue that allow you to stitch that together, particularly across multi-cloud environments, and multi-teams, multi-region. What we're then particularly keen is to understand, okay, if we abstract that out into almost like a boilerplate maturity model, does that fit, and can that help others to understand how APIs can play that role in supporting that team topology, basically?
Thank you both for sharing the context. Anyone have any questions or responses or ideas there?
I guess one thing I would think is it its own model, or is it a view or extension of the the overall platform maturity model? And is it a use case of platforms? Because platforms can be extended in many different directions. Do we need a separate one for data services or big data or what have you? Or do you need a core set of principles and then like adaptation to a specific use case? And I'm not saying that we need to do that, but I'm just curious, like how much overlap you see.
I think the primary overlap, and again, Richard, join in as and when needed. The primary overlap that we saw was, I think, with the platform engineering maturity model, I think it provided a really great starting point for decision makers, specifically, where we talk about things like investments, we talk about operation, we talk about people, the tooling. I think that's a great high-level way of looking at it, because that provides sort of that value for decision makers in terms of whether we need to invest and how much we need to do that into building out platforms better. I think what we wanted to do is to go that step further in terms of what do API platforms actually enable within organizations and what that would look like for implementers. So you're absolutely right. I think there is a commonality to the decision makers template, which I think is very similar to what the CNCF platform engineering maturity model looks like at this point. And we've kept it pretty much identical, almost identical there. What we've done is we've extended it to that next level of implementation, which again might vary depending on the type of platform that you're creating, where you might consider very specific pillars that you might need to hit if you were thinking about your maturity around those areas. So that was the thinking behind having that extension as opposed to replacement. This is by no means a replacement.
As a follow-up before Roth goes, is there scaffolding that could be there in the the maturity model isn't done, right? It's just a first generation.
Yeah.
Is there more scaffolding that could exist in the maturity model to help, again, with those specific use cases? Kind of missing right now, like not going too far into implementation, but more principles around what you would need to do for a specific type of platform.
I feel like that is possible.
That's almost
yes,
I'm sorry, that's a fairly open-ended question that maybe Abby can decide if we want to get that far into stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean,
I think just a quick point on that would be, sorry.
I was going to say, I want to get into those things. I think that what my hope was for today, because I don't think it's fair to anyone, either people who helped put the energy into writing down their thoughts or the people who have questions or ideas about it. Isn't fair to anyone to ask people to make assumptions without being able to read the doc. So I think this is about introducing like the goal, and I think figuring that out, and then allocating in the next meeting time to be able to deep dive on content and ideas and what are like realistic next steps and these asks around use cases and possible CNCF like investment and adoption and those kinds of things. Like that's where I think it would be a more productive conversation, would be my personal opinion. But if anyone thinks we can do better with that today, of course, definitely open to hearing that. I've been in that situation before where I'm like, I don't know, it's long. I'm trying to scan it and listen to what's going on and do all that at the same time. So, yeah.
No, I agree. I think it'll be more productive, I think, if we go it next time. I think the idea, like you say, was to introduce this so that you've had an opportunity to sort of at least know that this exists. Have a look at it, ask your questions. We want questions. Even criticisms are very, very open, because I think I almost get scared when there is too much positivity around the maturity model without criticism, because that sometimes indicates you haven't read it. So I appreciate all the questions. Happy to pick that up next time in the deep dive as well.
Just quickly, because I see you've got your hand up, Robert, but the only one thing I'd add to that is like Buddha said, what we have done, and this isn't in the communication yet, is try to think of the implementation in terms of open standards. So maybe one suggestion I'd make, like more specifically, is to say, okay, if the model decision makers is like at the higher level, what we've then done is to say, let's extend that with a view of open standards that apply in the API management world. So whether that's open API, whether that's open telemetry that we now use for observability, whether that's even like GraphQL or other open specifications, that's what we've then tried to extend it with more specifically, which maybe could be applied to other areas.
And yeah, Robert, you had your hand raised for a little while.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it looks good. You know, first impressions. But I agree. Like the first part seemed to be very much basically taken out of the platform engineering maturity model, which I think is perfectly fine from like, because the platform engineering maturity model is a very like organizational thing more than anything else. It's not technical implementation things. What I like the idea of having maybe being able to have a little bit of openness when it comes to in platform engineering maturity models, so that you could select, for instance, like you're building APIs and get a little bit more specifics, so that like that the part one kind of follows that. And but if you select, I'm just saying select for various reasons, select like you're building APIs, then the text would kind of change to adapt to that situation. So it's easier for people to understand in the context of what they're doing. And I like the idea of having some sort of like implementation part of this, which I think it makes sense, at least for like APIs. It's also gonna make sense for various other platforms to have like, yeah, this is decision making, this is the organization thing, but then we have the actual implementation thing, and then you know, with open standards, you know, being a little bit round, so it doesn't say like, you know, run pipelines or something like that, but like a little bit more of a like an open thing to kind of at least put people in you know, towards the right in the right direction, at least, if that made sense. Again, like I said before, my head is totally fried today, so this is just stuff spewing out. But yeah, I agree. We should look at this the next time around, get a chance to read and digest. But I think it looks good.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. I think one of the things I hear from what you're saying there, Robert, is like, and what you all, as you were introducing it, Richard and Buddha, was like, this is just one thing which can get dove into when it comes to platform engineering maturity, and there will be other aspects that would probably be peers to API management. And I think having that conversation, having the two-layer conversation in tandem of like, how should things like this be hung off the back of the maturity model, and how should this in specific, does this in specific, when regarding to API management, relate to the experiences of this group? So I think so I'd propose, I see you, Marsh, and I'm definitely going to give you 1 sec, but I just want to call out like an action item from this is I'd love for Richard and Muda, I've taken some notes into the group doc, but feel free to write them your own way. I think if you could intro this in the CNCF platforms working group Slack channel so that it's in written form and allows for async conversation over the next 2 weeks. We'll allocate some time in the next call to having those conversations in the more synchronous manner for those that are able to attend. And I think the big thing here is that you've asked, like, or you've mentioned this might move towards CNCF adoption. I've had this conversation with people before and just want to make clear, like, this group and the CNCF in general isn't really a publishing house. It's more like a working environment. So in my opinion, if we're aiming to get this into the CNCF working group, I would advocate that it very quickly shifts hands. So that would be exactly how we did it with the platform engineering maturity model. Syntasso, the company I work for, wrote something up and was like, do people find this interesting enough to debate? Yes. Okay, here you go. And then it became like we had 50 people from the community get involved. And so I think the big thing here is that it would lose Tyke ownership, and it would be positioned and moved into CNCF ownership sooner rather than later, because it wouldn't be a matter of adopting a finished product. It would be a matter of adopting a discussion. So something to think on, maybe before you put it in the chat or after as a part of that chat in the Slack, but something to think on. Marsh.
Really appreciate that direction and recommendation as well. Thank you so much.
as I said, it's the way a lot of these things work, because getting a community to write a first draft of something is like pulling teeth. But getting a community to react to something and evolve something is a lot easier. But the big thing is making sure that it's something that we can take, like, that the community feels ownership over, means that it can't be too close to final product. When I've seen us do that, what's ended up happening is it's taken so much time to unpick the fact that this isn't the final draft that we've wasted a lot of the energy of the group before coming back around and actually being able to create something together, because we've been unpicking something and then creating. So if we can start early days, we'll get a lot further a lot faster, I think, which would be exciting. So
yeah, plus one, what you were saying, Abby, I was going to touch on a few of those things, but one point thing I wanted to clarify, and I apologize for joining late, I have a conflict, and maybe it's just because for half the year this meeting moves an hour, is that right?
it's UTC time. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, great. So then I have an ongoing conflict that I got to resolve. Thanks. The point I wanted to make is that the maturity model we have, I think we made an effort to make it platform agnostic. It's principles of all platforms. It's not just infrastructure as a service type platforms. I'll pause there. Does anyone disagree with that statement so far?
No.
Okay, good. And so when we apply it to specific sort of platform verticals, just to call API platforms a vertical, if that works for you all, it's not clear to me what the point of having that kind of specific model is. That more practical how-to? Like, what is going to be different about this kind of platform? That's the part I was having trouble balancing in my head, and I apologize for joining late, and I missed the intro properly. Did my question make sense?
Pick up the discussion now, or shall we? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we can do it later.
I do have a response to that. Let's do it the next time, but for sure, I think I want to go deeper into it for sure.
Thanks. That's just like, I think that's how I'd like to begin, just to understand, like, how does this dovetail with the platform maturity model? Because it's not as obvious to me what purpose it serves on top of that. Not that it's not a bunch of good thought pulled together. It's just like, I want to imagine how this works for other similar kinds of platforms that feel more practical and applied. So that's it. Cool. Thanks, Buddha.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, then I'll put a line under that for now. But we're going to allocate time, as I said, probably the longer section of the next meeting to talking about this, because I think there seems to be energies around it. But let's try and get that kicked off with asynchronous chat if we can in the Slack first. Would be awesome. And we can do that, as I said, through the Slack. We can also, if it is something that you decide is like you're ready just to kind of throw it to the wolves of the group and throw it into the ownership of the group, that's the type of thing we can make an issue for. I'm happy to help you with making that decision and drawing that line when it makes sense for you. So just reach out. Yeah, happy to do that. So cool. And then we're kind of into like the half-hour mark, which is when we try and draw a line and say, can we get into something a bit deeper? And that is, we were thinking about the platform as a product work. So don't know if anyone from that group has a bit of a status report and anything that they want to try and get feedback from the group on the call.
Thanks, Abby. So I think we've aligned on the process that will make research kind of governable in the kind of open source context. There are a few things we're working on to launch this week, which is like an interviewer intake form. So those people that want to take the scripts and the protocol and the best practices guide and go and interview folks in their own network, or those people who just want to put up their hand to to be interviewers. So then we'll match them and give them folks to interview.
Michael, one short jump in here. Maybe we should go one step back and shortly introduce what we want to achieve with the research, because we have many new faces here.
Yeah, that's a good point. I take it for granted that it's the same spiel every time. Yeah, thanks. So taking a step back. So this project is meant to understand what the kind of current state of platform maturity looks like today by interviewing kind of widely platform teams, folks on the consuming side, and then eventually getting to platform leaders in the organization to paint a picture of current state The idea is that we would come back to this over time to keep taking a snapshot of what the industry looks like, to see which way things move. The research itself is focused on understanding capabilities and approaches to work. Behind the scenes on the synthesis side, that's where we're going to be pulling together, what does the approach to work look like? Like, how product minded is it? What practices are used to see how mature, product thinking is in platform organizations today. And to that end, we have a platform engineering script. The things we still need to do are, create a script for consumers of the platform to kind of gut check within the same organizations, and then a script for leaders around the business context and the strategic aspects around the platform and the business. This has kind of been a slow burn. To Abby's point, we had to walk some things back to make it truly a community-driven project. And it didn't start life as an understanding of current state. It was initially a little more opinionated about what product thinking is and how it's used and why it's valuable to platforms. So we rolled it back to just start with kind of a generative research project around understanding what reality looks like today. Any questions on that aspect of it? Purpose, where we are along that path, the value of this work?
I just want to call out on that conversation, yes, that was one of the examples of where starting quite opinionated meant that there was a lot of friction early days. But I want to throw out that since then, we have introduced the idea of the community blog being a lot more open and available for people. So if you find yourself in a very opinionated state and you would like to share what you think is the right way to do something, we have now found outlets for that. So that is different than something that is CNCF group produced, which is where we are currently at with the platform as a product work. But there's definitely opportunity to share things there, and that will drive visibility and things. Sorry. Adverts are complete. Move back to main content. Thank you, Michael.
I mean, that ties in nicely to kind of the blogs we have coming. So in terms of where we are in the flow work, is those PRs are going to probably come out this week on interview best practices for those people who want a refresher course or want to understand what it takes to interview. Since this is a community project, it's open to anybody who's interested in doing that work. They'll probably be initially paired with folks that are more seasoned, and then get cycles of interviewing that way. And then intake forms for both, folks who want to be interviewed and people who want to do the interviewing. We already have some names from the KubeCon in Paris and from before, and we're going to write a blog post on the research project and a link to those forms. So we hope to get a lot more folks in the pipeline. And then, we have a process for how we can actually collect this information, anonymize it, be GDPR compliant. Only the leads will have access to that spreadsheet behind the forms. Only the leads will have access to the scripts themselves. What will come out of that folder, open to the community to work on the synthesis part, will be anonymized, right? The only information that's going to come out is...
There we go.
Kind of,
Michael, we lost. I think we all lost about 10 or 15 seconds there.
Oh.
Yep.
I didn't, but
no?
I see Marsh agreeing, so...
And
all right,
someone else was gesturing. Interesting.
I'll just briefly say the process I think that works for how research can be done. Oh, there you go. Thank you very much for sharing. So in order for this to be GDPR compliant, there are kind of lead restricted access to information around the intake forms and the spreadsheets behind that, around interviewers and companies and all that good stuff. We'll be doing the matching. And then the other critical point is interviewers uploading those scripts. They live in a restricted folder. What comes out the other side will be anonymized versions of them, where you'll have industry, you'll have role, you'll have some meta information around the company and the people who we've interviewed, but they'll be properly anonymized. Are there
Awesome.
any?
So,
Yeah.
so I heard an ask in there around more people to interview and more people to do interviews. So if you're someone who works at what the CNCF calls end user companies, so companies that do not profit from platform engineering but depend on it. So that would be likely non-consultants, non-vendors is the shorthand for that. That would be great to get interviewed. Just to say that doesn't, from my understanding, you can correct me, Michael, that doesn't dissuade you from becoming an interviewer. It'd just be great to interview you first so that we can also learn from your experiences, and then you can move on and interview others as well. Is that? Oh,
Yeah. In open source context, we're not we're taking some liberties around places in terms of exposure of the interviews themselves. Like there will be, I don't know if pollution's the right way to say it, but like in terms of the integrity of the research, it would be a little different than if you were running it on a small team in your own company and you tightly control that process, right? By nature of it being an open source project, we're taking some liberties with it, but I don't think it will like really materially impact the insights on the other end, right? The goal here is still just to understand what the current state looks like by talking to key folks around the platform.
I think the important thing is first do the interview as an interviewee, that you're not biased when it comes to the answers. And once you have been interviewed, feel free to also join us in the interview process and interview people. I just think it's it's a bit more cross-polluting if you already hear the answers of other people. So it definitely helps if you first be unbiased as a practitioner. And yeah, we will work, or I think mainly Michael is working on Google Forms for the sign up for both sites, as you've seen in the short little graph, that you can just sign up in a Google form if you want to be interviewed or if you want to take interviews. And we'll make sure that the interview process is as standardized and as platformy experienced as possible.
Yeah, well, when we post out in Slack and the blog link to the forms, we'll include what Dominic just mentioned in terms of sequencing and who we're actually looking for.
Abby, quick question for you and Robert too. Where do we, is there some way for us to add documents to some sort of like CNCF Google Workspace, or should we continue to have it wherever we?
There's no like specific Google Drive that we can use in itself. So it's usually the various leads and so on and so forth that host these things and make sure that everyone has access.
Okay, that's fine. I just, I put up I use my Google Workspace to host the original forum that we put up in Paris, and I felt slightly awkward about that. So
it's one of those things that kind of doesn't make sense, but it's just the practice that's been forever.
Yeah, we're also doing this under the assumptions that we're not going to get any research tools, so we're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, unless there's someone that did something and there's I don't know. Have you asked anyone? Or Abby? Yeah.
Josh was asking, and I'm still in the threads on that, and we've gotten a ping back just before Paris that they're still aware of it, but hadn't yet gotten any new ideas. So I think in the case, Dave, if you were awkward because you weren't sure if you should, you're good to go. If you were awkward because you would ask for it not to be under yours, if ideally, then feel free to talk to a lead.
No,
and
I'm
take
fine.
It on.
It's just that when I thought it looked anonymous, and then when Colin looked at it, or someone else, he said, "Oh, it shows up as missing mass." So I just wanted that to be.
Yep.
That's fine, then I'm fine.
Yeah, but if there is any situation where that is needed, just reach out. I have a Google Workspace for Cloud Native Norway that I can use. That's very much in line of what's going on here. So,
So I guess I would ask maybe for you all, anyone who's been involved in this, is there anything stopping us from running interviews tomorrow? other than today being near the end of the day here in Europe.
If you take the platform engineering script as it is today, you could probably just run with it. There were some kind of guardrail hygiene things around the protocol for the interview itself, like how to run an interview if you've never really run one before, and interview best practices, just how to ask follow-up questions, how to avoid leading questions, that kind of stuff.
And have
But
those been captured at this point? Those ideas?
they're not complete.
Not complete
So
yet. Okay. So we've still
but-
got, so an outstanding item is like interview hygiene, I guess, or whatever, interview coaching, maybe.
I wanted to put up those PRs this week, and then that should unblock everything, meaning that if you have people to interview, like the first group that can just run with it are people who have network, who know they want to talk to certain people that meet the criteria. They can take the script, they can run with it, because we can, we're building the plane as we go, right? Like you can Slack over the transcript if the form for uploading your interviews isn't there yet. Like we can work with that. It shouldn't hold up the ability to just interview.
The good thing is we have a tag in all the issues, so you can just search for the tag. I put the link in there as well. The one open story that Michael is currently working on as well is the interview best practice. So if you have any ideas or opinions, what we should think about there as well, we already have some links that pointed us into good directions. Just feel free to add your comments to those issues.
I guess what I'm wondering in the kind of high bandwidth opportunity we have in the next 10 to 15 minutes is there anything that is uncertain that would be a good discussion point? So like that was necessary, right? To be able to get people on the same page about where we're headed and what we're up to and give people the right places to go to get involved from today forward. Is there anything that you'd like to use the rest of the time here with us that's like, here's a puzzle we have. Here's a thing we would like feedback on, and that kind of thing.
I think we can use the last 10 minutes to talk about another initiative that we started in the same time, because why not having more projects? Which is coming still from our discussion last week and the coffee that we had, the Lean Platform Coffee in KubeCon, where we realized that we are taking assumptions on what level our target audience has when it comes to understanding product thinking. And so I think until the next time, definitely, we will post it in the Slack channel as well. We will open up a pull request with a first of a potential blog series where we want to talk about basics of product thinking and really like absolute ground level basics, because that was one of the learnings from KubeCon talking to people there, that we took a lot of assumptions in the level of maturity that people interested in that platform as a product topic have, and those seem to not be too true. So we took a couple of steps back, and even within the first draft of the block outline, which is met earlier today, took even like half of the content that we put in there, put it out because it's too deep level already. And that would be an interesting thing. What core concepts of product thinking do you think we assume as everybody knows it? But like, it would be nice to have a base understanding of that as well. The first thing that we have is talk to your customers, and we try to just be there. Talk to your customers, and what happens if you don't talk to them, which is they work around your platform. More details to that as soon as the pull request opens up, promised, and then we can collect more feedback to it. But we try to keep it as lean and as focused on the initial point as possible in the beginning.
So I think that's awesome. I think this is where blog posts we can get ourselves bogged down, right? And I think I'm hearing some concern maybe from you as an author of like trying to get like the first step out before we start doing the collaboration. My understanding and my proposal for the way that we do things is blogs should be open for feedback, but they should move quickly. And if you find yourself in wanting to extend on a blog post that someone else has written extensively, or you want to have a different opinion than someone has written in a blog post in a respectful manner, like that's okay, and you can write additional blog posts. So we want the cadence to not be that every blog post takes months and months to get out. It's more like, let's get things out to the community with reasonable like ideas that are well thought out and not vendor driven and or vendor agnostic and are all these things, but that basically can get things out and get feedback, and then we can evolve those ideas. If we want something to be more formal, that it's hard to get done in less than a couple months, just because of the amount of reviews and things. So this sounds to me like maybe we could open an issue that says like encourage community blogs about product thinking, and then attach a few anybody. I've noticed a few people have already raised their hands interested in both feeding back on your blog and maybe producing their own accordingly. And we could track maybe a few blogs that are different experiences, and that will start to create buzz hopefully around the work that y'all are doing as well, and get more interviewers and interviewees and all that, if that's reasonable.
Yeah, that was also our main idea behind it, to just, throw some very base level out there and then see where the most questions come in, which also has a call to action at the end, is like join the discussion and all that, so that we can learn what are other assumptions of prior knowledge in, product thinking or prior experience that is not met. And we really took some thought in it to not introduce any concepts or any models, but really be as simple as possible. And from there, we can then start to explore further which other core concepts should we make a deep dive or look at.
I've been reminding all along the way about how simple-minded us old IT folk are, and how we used to work. So
yeah. So that is definitely another thing that will come out of platform as a product very soon. So if you already have some ideas, let's throw them in Slack and then just see where the discussion leads us.
So Abby, you would like to see like maybe a tracking issue, and I wasn't clear on whether issues were. Everyone always says just create a PR. You don't need an issue for a blog post, I'm assuming, just the PR.
No, yeah. I'm gonna. You can if you're trying to look for like a partner in crime or get review or all those things. You can do that, but you can just start with a PR if you're like, I have a thing, I'd like it to be merged, please. You can just start there. But I'm gonna create an issue. I'm actually typing that up now. That is, as we said, sort of encouraging those platform or those product thinking blogs. It's open-ended. I would scold myself if I was working for a more formal company trying to have a roadmap and those kinds of things, but just to call out. But I think the ideas we want to have, I would like to make sure we encourage, there's a few people who have ideas here, make sure people know that they're open to share their own thoughts along that blog, and definitely want to try and get more turnover on the community blog, because I think that's what will drive more alignment, is seeing each other's writing and trying to like identify where we align, where we have differences, that kind of thing. So
yeah, I think that's to your point, that's the super interesting part about this, is it's a fast moving process. You can get your ideas out there. It will trigger a reaction, more questions, and then the virtuous cycle of, people writing in response with their own opinions. So it's a nice contrast to the kind of slow moving side of the work.
Exactly. Any other ideas around platform track?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how are you planning to recruit for the interviews, by the way? How have you sort of
So
reached?
we posted at KubeCon EU, and during Platform Day, we put up a link for a sign up form, and we got about 33 people, at least 20 of which are already on Slack. So there's no complication with getting in touch with them. That was the other official email question I think we had last time. But the other thing we're going to do is create a blog post to kind of introduce the thing that we're doing. put that up and then have people help us out by publicizing it on social media. And then the other thing is just networks. What's that?
I was going to say, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask if that was the thing, because I would love to do some publicity, try and hit up my network,
Yeah,
having
yeah,
a thing
yeah.
I can point to and say, hey, come do this.
Exactly.
So
I don't think we'll have too much of an issue getting people in. We just need to give a focal point with a blog post so that people can figure out how to sign up.
Well, I guess maybe another angle on this as well would be like, what from participants in this call, are there any things associated with platform as a product that you are hoping we dig into in either blog posts or in the interviews that you want to kind of, knowing you may not have been able to read all of the stuff that group has been working on to date, if you throw something out, we can be like, yes, we have that covered. No, that's an interesting idea, kind of thing.
So just remind me again, who are the what are the profiles of the people you're speaking to? It was platform like managers and then platform consumers. Like
we're starting with builders, so that could extend a little bit upward in sort of management chain. And I think the next two profiles are more senior management executives, possibly. And then we're also going to extend pretty quickly into users, right? I think one of the things I've seen is I joined there's a new working group / tag being proposed around application development, cloud native application development. And we're missing a lot of perspective of the users, because effectively what they propose could be boiled down to developer experience on Kubernetes. Right. And so like we can build all the platform we want, but in a way, like there's a bit of a gap for platform engineers. And like we're talking about the process of finding out what people want, but there's already a fair number of people already participating with the CNCF who could tell us like, okay, this is what we actually want. And it may stretch the boundaries of like practical application versus principles that we're talking about, but it'd be a good candidate for at least a discussion.
Yeah, I would say, and I'll post it after, unless somebody beats me to it. There's the platform engineering script aimed at builders. What we found is, when we ran a few mock interviews just to clean it up and kind of figure out pacing and all that good stuff, not all builders can answer questions around kind of the business objectives, roadmap, prioritization, all that good stuff. So it would lend itself naturally that there will be another script kind of focused on the kind of more business strategic side of platforms for leaders, and then also on consumers as a gut check on what we learn from builders. So the thing we want to encourage, and the ideal would be that you can actually interview these personas within the same org, right? So like you start with builders, and then you can talk, get a referral to somebody on the consuming team, and then get a referral hopefully to a leader, and get that whole kind of view into the org, because that I think will give us the best sense of reality. How are things done today?
I think just adding on to that, I think one of the hopes that I would have with this kind of a conversation is also sort of outcomes and value, because I think that matters quite a lot in terms of adoption and investments in organizations, where while we can talk about how you're building things, but what kind of ultimate outcomes is it actually driving, sort of for the end users as well as for immediate customers? I think that could be, if we can quantify that in some way, I think that could be really, really powerful. Like by adopting sort of for this platform as a product approach, what have we actually achieved? What would not doing this also look like? And I think if there is a way to sort of bake that into this conversation, that would be quite powerful.
So I would say just when you think about the work, we want to be, and we had these, so there's some context in how we got to this place. There were conversations around this before. We are really trying to understand kind of what is happening today without kind of imbuing or leading or kind of adding into the conversation anything around product thinking or that verbiage. We want to do that on the back end, on the synthesis side, to understand are these things being done? To what extent are they being done? How prevalent is this approach to work? So the interviews themselves are really just like, how do you work today, right? What do you, how do you prioritize? How do you build? What capabilities do you have? How do you think of success? And then on the back end, we're the ones who will have to synthesize that into how well does it conform to what we think are good, product practices.
Understand. I think this is more for the hope of the sort of the blog post series that we are thinking about. I think to sort of cover some of these areas in that series would be quite powerful, because I think there's the question that we do get asked quite a bit as well. Like, okay, we've spoken about maturity models and we've spoken about possible implementation, but what kind of value is it driving to organizations? Can we quantify that? Because we need to sell to because we believe in this, but our bosses need to also be convinced enough to be able to invest things in the appropriate manner. So to be able to help in that direction would be really powerful. So that's my hope from this.
Yeah, and that's kind of my hope for the leader interviews, right? How did they understand value? How did they build alignment and articulate it and connect all these things? I think they're the people who are best placed to kind of answer those questions, as opposed to like the builders at the platform level.
And at the same time, I think our blog series about product thinking can get into this, because I honestly think that the idea of outcomes and such is pretty underdeveloped in the industry. Like, I need to sell it to my boss is the question everywhere, right? Because people in technology don't usually have a good way of connecting to business value. So I think there's going to be a bit of push and pull here in terms of maybe injecting some ideas, because I think everyone needs help with this. So I don't think we're going to find, unless it's a Spotify or a Google or somebody like that, I'm not going to find a lot of people who have a firm answer on this.
But there's also a danger to it. We don't want to create a blog series that gives the answers to the research that we are doing in the same time. That's why, we should focus on the baselines that we somehow expect that everybody knows within the interview process. And then we can use whatever we find in the interview process to drive further blog posts, deep diving into it. But, as soon as we start discussing, like, successful platforms are doing this without having the research behind it, and giving us our own answers, we will definitely shoot at our own research.
I think that definitely the blogs for the community are going to be we will identify if people are trying to make sweeping statements, because that would be probably something that would be not as a good fit for, hey, I'm sharing my experiences within the community. That'd be more of a fit for, hey, this is something that I think we should be publishing for wider, like, kind of ground leveling, right? And that's the stuff that takes a little bit more effort. So I think where I would be comfortable is if someone says, I've done these things and I've seen these benefits or whatever, and less so of like, across the industry, I'm seeing this, because that is what we're trying to do the research on, right? So yeah, to your point, Dominic, I think there's a risk that people will have read the blogs and then want to report back what they've read. I don't believe our readership is that high, as much as I wish that we had that level of impact. But I think we'll be okay, hopefully. So,
and if we're worried about this kind of filtering back up to us through the interviewees, I mean, that's another kind of core litmus test for the interview script itself, right? It should ask good questions and gut check them around reality, right? It shouldn't be so open-ended that people can give us aspirational answers as if they were the truth, and we just take that on face value.
I think what Dominic said was also in response to what I was proposing as the blog series, getting into some of those value proposition things. Like, we have to be careful about being too specific about that while we're researching that, so that we don't have to contradict ourselves when we report on the research. And I think there is a lot about product mindset that has to do with value and establishing value. That's just the general practices that product people do that platform engineering people don't. And like, we can get into the value of establishing value and figuring it out without getting into the specifics of how to connect that through an indirect system like we have. There's most product management, right, has, I do this new feature, I get this number of users or revenue or whatever, and that The tough part for us and for everyone is like, how do you establish that when it's indirect?
Cool. I think we're just about at time here, so gonna need to call it, unfortunately. But I think this has been really good because I think it's opened up a lot of people's awareness of what's going on with platform as a product, and B, hopefully a drive towards more kind of blog discussions of what makes sense there and all that stuff. So yeah, so please see the tracking issue that has just been dropped in the chat and is in there. Please take a look at the Tyke maturity model if you're interested in that discussion at the next session, and hopefully that will be happening in Slack as well. So if you're not already in WG-platforms inside the CNCF Slack, please do join it. And that sort of wraps us up for today, unless anyone has any parting needs for the call. Otherwise, we'll pick back up on Slack and see you in a couple weeks. Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
Exactly.
Thanks. See you around.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. See you all in a couple weeks and on Slack. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, folks. Bye-bye.